December 7th, 1943, 0347 hours, the Western Pacific, 200 miles southeast of Tokyo Bay. Commander Dudley Mush Morton braces himself against the periscope housing as USS Wahoo cuts through black water at periscope depth. Through the eyepiece, he watches a Japanese convoy materialize from the pre-dawn darkness. 4 cargo ships, 2 escorts, all silhouetted against the faint glow of the eastern horizon. His exec, Lieutenant Dick O'Kane, stands at the plotting table, calculating firing solutions with practiced precision. Morton's finger hovers over the firing key. Standard doctrine says, fire from 1,500 yards, stay deep, stay safe, launch torpedoes, dive to 300 feet, evade the destroyers and hope something hits. But Morton isn't following standard doctrine tonight. All ahead full, make your depth 6 feet. O'Kane's head snaps up. 60 feet puts the periscope barely submerged. At flank speed, they'll throw a wake visible for miles. The destroyers will see them. Every ship in that convoy will know exactly where they are. Skipper, do it. The deck plates vibrate as Wahoo's engines surge to full power. Morton keeps his eye pressed to the periscope, watching the range close. 1,500 yards, 120, 1,000. The convoy hasn't reacted yet. They don't expect what's coming. What Commander Morton was about to prove in the next 8 minutes would transform American submarine warfare from a cautious game of long-range ambush into something the Japanese merchant marine would come to fear more than anything else in the Pacific. And the tactic would sink over 300 enemy vessels before war's end. For 18 months since Pearl Harbor, the United States submarine force had been strangling in its own doctrine. By December 1943, American boats had sunk only 468 Japanese merchant vessels, barely a quarter of what pre-war strategists had predicted. The numbers told a damning story. Japanese cargo tonnage reaching home ports had actually increased since 1942. Rice from Indochina, oil from the Dutch East Indies, iron from Manchuria, the raw materials feeding Japan's war machine flowed with barely a trickle of interruption. The problem wasn't the submarines themselves. The Gato-class boats were engineering marvels. 311 feet of welded steel capable of diving to 300 feet, cruising 11,000 miles without refueling, and carrying 24 torpedoes in 10 tubes. On paper, they were the most capable submarines ever built. The problem was how they were being used. Navy doctrine written in the 1930s and calcified through decades of peacetime exercises demanded caution above all else. Commanders were taught to attack from maximum range, ideally 3,000 yards or more, fire a spread of torpedoes, dive immediately to 300 feet, rig for depth charges, and creep away on silent running. The assumption was that submarines were fragile, that surface escorts were deadly, and that the only way to survive was to stay hidden, stay deep, and take shots from the edge of effectiveness. The statistics backed up the failure. Through all of 1942 and into 1943, American submarines averaged 0.53 ships sunk per patrol. Nearly half of all torpedoes fired missed completely. When they did hit, the infamous Mark 114 torpedo, plagued by faulty magnetic exploders and depthing problems, failed to detonate 60% of the time. Submarine skippers returned from patrol after patrol with stories of perfect setups ruined by torpedoes that ran too deep, exploded prematurely, or simply clunked against enemy hulls without detonating. But even after Buard finally fixed the torpedo problems in September 1943, sinking rates barely improved. The weapons worked, the boats were capable. What wasn't working was the doctrine. Commander Charles Lockwood, who'd taken over as Commander Submarine Force Pacific in February 1943, reviewed patrol reports with growing frustration. His submarine captains, many of them academy graduates trained in the cautious pre-war doctrine, were consistently firing from ranges where even small errors in target speed, angle, or course made hits nearly impossible. They were so focused on staying hidden that they were rendering themselves ineffective. "We're fighting this war like we're afraid of our own boats," Lockwood told his staff in October 1943. Patrol reports showed American submarines breaking off attacks if escorts approached within 2,000 yards. They were retreating before they'd even fired. The Japanese had learned this too. Their convoy escorts knew that if they simply charged towards the general direction of a periscope sighting, the American submarine would dive and disengage. The Imperial Japanese Navy anti-submarine forces, initially caught off guard in 1942, had adapted. By late 1943, they were running convoys with aggressive escort tactics, knowing that American submarines would always choose evasion over pressing an attack. Japanese merchant captains were beginning to feel confident again. Shipping losses were manageable. The war economy hummed along. What Admiral Lockwood desperately needed was someone willing to prove that American submarines didn't have to fight scared. He needed someone to demonstrate that the boats were tougher, faster, and more capable than the doctrine assumed. He needed someone to show that aggressive tactics, getting close, staying on the surface, pressing attacks home despite escorts, could work. He had that someone, several of them actually, a new generation of submarine commanders who had come of age in combat, not in peacetime exercises. Men who questioned the old assumptions, men like Sam Dealey on USS Harder, Eugene Fluckey on USS Barb, Dick O'Kane, who would soon take command of USS Tang, and especially Dudley Mush Morton on USS Wahoo, who was about to demonstrate just how devastatingly effective a submarine could be when its commander threw caution and the doctrine manual completely overboard. The Japanese Maritime Escort Command considered American submarines a persistent nuisance but not an existential threat. Their assessment wasn't entirely wrong, at least not in early 1943. Captain Ogawa Koshiro, architect of Japan's convoy defense system, had studied American submarine tactics throughout 1942 and concluded that they were predictable to the point of timidity. The enemy commander fires from maximum distance and immediately dives deep, read one Imperial Navy tactical bulletin from March 1943. Aggressive prosecution by escorts will force disengagement in nearly all cases. Japanese destroyer captains were trained to charge directly at periscope sightings, drop a pattern of depth charges, and resume station. More often than not, the American submarine would be gone, having slipped away at deep depth rather than press the attack. The numbers supported Japanese confidence. In 1942, Japan lost only 180 merchant ships to submarines, painful but manageable for an empire controlling resource zones from Burma to the Central Pacific. Japanese shipyards were launching new cargo vessels faster than subs could sink them. The rice still flowed from Indochina. Oil still came from Borneo and Sumatra. Iron ore from Manchuria kept the steel mills running. The convoy system was working. Meanwhile, American submarine force leadership wrestled with a crisis of effectiveness. Patrol after patrol returned with expenditure rates, torpedoes fired versus ships sunk that were embarrassingly wasteful. USS Gudgeon fired 16 torpedoes on one patrol and sank nothing. USS Greenling expended 22 torpedoes for 2 confirmed kills. Boats were staying out for 60 days, burning through their entire weapons loadout and coming home with marginal results. The problem went beyond just doctrine. It was cultural. Submarine commanders were evaluated not on ships sunk, but on whether they brought their boats home intact. Boats and crews lost meant investigations, boards of inquiry, potential court-martial for recklessness. The incentive structure rewarded caution. Taking risks, especially risks that departed from established doctrine, could end a career faster than enemy action. Several aggressive skippers had already been relieved of command. In August 1942, the captain of USS Triton was removed after he surfaced to engage a Japanese patrol boat with his deck gun, a violation of doctrine that said submarines should never intentionally fight surface vessels. The fact that he'd won the engagement didn't matter. He'd violated protocol. But by late 1943, Admiral Lockwood was running out of patience with safe, ineffective patrols. The strategic situation demanded results. Japan's merchant fleet was the artery feeding their war machine. Cut that artery and the empire would slowly bleed out, but only if submarines started sinking ships faster than Japanese shipyards could replace them. Then came December 1943, USS Wahoo's 5th Patrol. Commander Morton had already developed a reputation as an aggressive skipper, but what he was about to demonstrate would be so radical, so contrary to established doctrine that even Lockwood's staff wondered if Morton had crossed the line from aggressive to suicidal. They couldn't have known that Morton's tactics, Tactics he was developing in real time through trial and error would become the template for the most devastating submarine campaign in naval history. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you know about the American submarine war in the Pacific. Drop a comment below and let me know if you heard about Commander Mush Morton and USS Wahoo before. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II naval history, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. Morton called it down-the-throat shooting, though the formal term wouldn't be coined until after the war. The concept was simple in theory, terrifying in execution. Instead of firing from the beam at maximum range, drive straight towards the convoy at high speed, close to point-blank range, and shoot while the targets are still trying to figure out what you're doing. The tactic violated every principle in the submarine warfare manual. It surrendered stealth for aggression. It put the submarine in the exact position